who do you think is the real JD Vance? Is the real JD Vance the one that you knew and were friends with?
For me, it's mostly sad and heartbreaking. Who the JD Vance is at this point, I think we have to take him at his word.
People change. Do you not have some sympathy, in a way, with somebody just kind of finding the spot they want to get to and doing it?
But there's a difference between evolving and abandoning your values.
Can you see him as the next US president?
I hope that's not our future, but I hope that Donald Trump wouldn't get elected. And here we are.
The Newsagents USA.
We've talked a lot about JD Vance, his visit to Greenland, what he's doing, what it represents. We're going to talk now a bit more about JD Vance, because we're joined now on the line by Sofia Nelson, who is a Detroit-based public defender, but who was at Yale Law School with JD Vance. And Sofia, you and he were friends, weren't you?
Yes, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. JD and I were in law school together and we became friends, yes.
You were famously mentioned or part of the book you wrote, the bestseller Hillbilly Elegy, and he referred to you in a way that, you know, he said you may or may not like as his progressive lesbian friend. In other words, he was, I guess, setting you up as somebody who had very different values to him, but somebody who he was friends with still, and you went to his wedding and was sort of, you know, college mates, I guess. Is there still a friendship there between you?
There isn't. We lost touch in 2021 when he started expressing national views that I felt attacked my identity personally as a transgender person, as well as the identities of people that I consider close to me, whether they be immigrants or other vulnerable communities in the United States. And I reached out to him about that, and we had a falling out. We never shared a political ideology, and that's fine. I have many friends from different political backgrounds or different political beliefs, but there has to be a foundation of mutual respect there that was certainly lost when he decided to tie himself to Donald Trump.
Because in the early days of your friendship, or around 2016, you saw a man who was very critical of Donald Trump, very critical of the policies of that incoming administration. Do you understand what changed, what happened for him?
I mean, I know what he told me, which rings hollow to me. What seems to be the case is that there was no advancement politically for him without aligning himself with Donald Trump, because you cannot be a successful Republican in the United States without sucking up to Donald Trump. And so he had to completely reverse himself and turn his back on a lot of what I thought were our shared values of, even if you disagree, you treat everyone with mutual respect. Cruelty is not a part of politics. That when you share community with people, you demonstrate some base level of kindness. And I think that's been abandoned at every level of his public persona.
That's so interesting what you say, Sophia, because I suppose the question it raises is, who do you think is the real JD Vance? Is the real JD Vance the one that you knew and were friends with? Or is the real JD Vance the one we see now, who talks about childless cat ladies or whatever it happens to be? In a way that you find so offensive and a lot of other people find, you know, quite disturbing?
For me, it's mostly sad and heartbreaking. But at some point, you become who you're playing in public, right? That you can only hold a cognitive distance between whatever values you might hold privately and who you're performing publicly. So who the JD Vance is at this point, I think we have to take him at his word and who he tells us he is. So that's kind of my take on that.
Sophia, can I just put it out there? People change. I mean, you know, here you've got a guy who came from nowhere, very difficult beginnings, was clearly ambitious, went to Yale Law School, is probably unapologetic about the fact that, yeah, he wanted power, he wanted to change the world, he wanted to get into politics, and he saw the route to do it. I mean, do you not have some sympathy in a way, was somebody just kind of finding the spot they want to get to and doing it.
I have no problem with ambition or JD's ambition. In fact, I used to really encourage him to get involved in politics because I thought that even though we had different prescriptions for the problems we saw, that he genuinely cared about working class people from the Midwest, where we both grew up. And I also grew up in a working class community that was devastated by many of the same economic issues that affected Middletown, Ohio, where he grew up. But to say that people change, of course, we change our opinions on things. We change a lot, and we all should mature and change. But there's a difference between evolving and abandoning your values. And some core values that I was raised with have never changed. And to see him turn his back on those, whether it's mutual respect, kindness.
Give us an example. What would you say are the values that he's abandoned? I mean, where would you sort of pinpoint how that's happened, where that's happened?
Respect, kindness, honesty, integrity. I think that's...
But I mean, in terms of policies, was there something that he used to object to that he now loves? I mean, was there something that you thought he was against that he'd now vote in favour of? I mean, where do you see the divergence coming in terms of who he is now?
He was pro-marriage equality. Now he's against it, is I think one clear example. He understood Donald Trump's rhetoric to be very harmful to naturalized Americans and making them feel like they didn't belong in their own country. And now he espouses rhetoric even more cruel and dismissive. I mean, he's the origin of accusing Haitian immigrants of eating cats and dogs.
Yeah.
There was one moment, though, wasn't there, where JD Vance adopts Catholicism and has ideologically kind of attached himself to a number of people sort of on this kind of post-liberal right that want to actually fundamentally change America in terms of it being a separation between church and state.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's a really important thing that happened around 2019 for him. And when he became attached to the post-liberal right and showed interest in that movement, converted to Catholicism, started showing a lot of admiration for Viktor Orban, which I think we can all agree he's dramatically transformed Hungary, and Donald Trump and JD Vance see that as a model for how they want to transform the United States, and they've expressed that. But now that he's in power, you're actually see him tacking towards even a different, arguably more radical group of techno-authoritarians, whether that be Peter Thiel or Elon Musk or Curtis Yarvin. So he seems to shift wherever the center of power is at any given moment. So with the techno-authoritarians, he has access to billions of dollars to advance his political career. So he's aligning himself with that, which is an austerity agenda, very different from kind of the economic populism that he was espousing on the trail. And there's nothing about Elon Musk's agenda that's going to help a laid off auto worker in Ohio.
Just explain to me a techno-authoritarian, because I'm sure there'll be people here who are not familiar with what that means, what it involves.
It's this political ideology that's become incredibly popular in Silicon Valley. They believe that there are exclusively white male geniuses that have risen in tech that are better suited to rule this country than anyone who might be elected. They want the government to be run like a startup, which, move fast and break things, I think is kind of the idea.
The old
and
Facebook
centralized
motto.
power in a CEO type figure. And so there's an intellectual on the techno-authoritarian right that's quite popular named Curtis Yarvin, and he's actually calling for a return of monarchy.
So is there a clash now between the sort of Steve Bannon-like figures who do, I think, I mean, if you take the Nazi salute out of things for a moment, they do still fundamentally believe or espouse economic populism. They don't believe that the world should belong to the techno-nationalists. Is that fair?
Yes, I mean, I think Steve Bannon has been very clear on that, attacking Elon Musk and the techno-authoritarians. Certainly it's hard to say, setting the Nazism of it all aside, it's a pretty big problem. And that is something that I think techno-authoritarians and the kind of MAGA Steve Bannon wing share. But there is a big difference in their economic agenda. The Steve Bannon wing has some shared ideas with Bernie Sanders, and the idea that there needs to be a robust middle class. That is certainly not part of Elon Musk's agenda. I mean, Elon Musk went on Twitter and joked with Donald Trump about firing people when they try to unionize. Yeah. What is more economic populism than a union?
So let us go back to JD Vance now. Can you see him as the next US president?
Certainly that's what he wants. I hope that's not our future, but I hoped that Donald Trump wouldn't get elected, and here we are.
And Sofia, I'm still struggling with something, which is you saying we should take him at his word when he says something, and he is serious about it, whilst at the same time, you are describing a chameleon who keeps changing his colours.
Well, so I think we should take him at that, right? Which is that there is no there. There's a hollow, ambitious person who is willing to adopt whatever ideology is necessary to advance their career. And that's when I talk about the lack of integrity. And I think that's deeply concerning, because a hallmark of a leader is someone who is willing to have moral clarity, even when maybe it's not popular.
Just before we let you go, Sofia, we've been talking about the Let's Bomb Yemen group chat along with the whole world this week. And one thing that, once you get over the kind of what the moment about it, you're down to the content of some of the messages. And it becomes quickly clear that JD Vance and Pete Hegseth, to name but two, have very little respect for Europe. And I guess, we're going to have a lot of European listeners, UK listeners, trying to understand if JD Vance always felt that way. I mean, I remember the very first thing he said about the UK in Wisconsin when he was nominated as VP was, it was the first Islamist nuclear state. Yeah, exactly. So I'm just wondering if you remember, did he always hate Europe?
No. Not at all. In fact, I remember how excited he was to go for the first time with Usha. So, no, this is part of his new political ideology. And it's a real shame, because obviously the post-World War II order to, keep us all safe and avoid international conflict is incredibly beneficial to both the United States and Europe. And to see it kind of fall apart in such a dismissive and condescending way is really disappointing. And it's not just Europe. I mean, poor Canada.
That's next. I love that as an ending. It's a real shame. It's the understatement of the whole conversation. Sofia Nelson,
I'm sorry, by the way, as an American, I it's not great to watch your world leaders send emojis celebrating a bombing that, however you feel about it, I'm sure there was innocent people lost in that event, and to just kind of have explosion fist American flag emojis feels very lacking the solemnity that you would hope from your leaders.
Just finish off. What do you think's going on in Greenland this week? I mean, he sort of muscled in on his wife's trip there, both uninvited as far as we can see. What is America
Greenland
kind of
made
making
it pretty
this?
clear that they weren't invited, right?
Yeah.
I have no idea it looks like the United States wants to make imperialism great again. And I'm not sure there's an appetite for that anywhere in the world, certainly not in Canada or Greenland.
Sofia Nelson, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
What you're doing here in Tucson impacts not only Arizona, the whole world is watching. And what people all across this country are saying, do we have the guts to stand up to Trumpism and oligarchy and authoritarianism? We say yes.
That was Bernie Sanders. He's on tour with AOC, and they have been doing an anti-oligarch tour of all places, Nevada, but lots of places in the Southwest, places that you don't naturally expect Bernie Sanders to pop up. And I guess this is part of the fight back, because everyone is asking the same question at the moment. What are the Democrats doing? Are they going to lie down, play dead, get run over, or are they going to go out on the stump and do it? And I think Bernie's one of the few voices who, frankly, has been saying the same thing for the last 40 years, but is saying it with increasing urgency today in a way that is actually probably quite welcome amongst those people who would naturally vote Democrat, who feel that their own party is now letting them down by just doing so little.
Look, we know that Bernie Sanders is a formidable campaigner. He's good on the stump. He does attract huge amounts of support from a lot of young people when he does all this stuff. AOC is obviously of a very different generation to Sanders. Sanders is an old man now.
Creeping up to an age at which she might herself be considering a presidential run.
Exactly. But is the Democratic Party going to really counter the popularity of Trump from the left? It's a really open question. I still think that we're waiting to see emerge a central figure that the Democratic Party can get behind. You know, if you think of the template of British politics, you have a leader of the opposition. However crap, you've at least got a focal point. The Democrats do not have a focal point. They're still floundering after the election defeat, trying to work out some of the terrible maths and terrible kind of metrics that came out from that election and what to do next and how to fight Trump.
And the figures that most people will have heard of have been around for a long time. Whether it's Bernie Sanders, whether it's Nancy Pelosi, whether it's Chuck Schumer, they're all now people in their 70s, dare I say 80s, right? And so we're now looking to see who is going to start to emerge. One of the people I've been looking at over the last few weeks, is Jon Ossoff, who is the Georgia senator, and very young, 37, has been very powerful in the places that he's hit back. Most recently on the whole Let's Bomb Yemen group chat, and previously to that in terms of how they have to deal with Trump trying to shut down the Congress. And I would say he's one. I mean, whenever I say something like this, I jinx their career forever. So, you know, sorry, James Cleverly and all the rest of it. But he would be my person to watch. You like who? Andy Bashir?
Andy Bashir in Kentucky.
Governor.
Yeah, there are a few. Jared Polis in Colorado, the governor there. He's a kind of very articulate spokesperson. There are a few people who are mayors as well in certain places who you could see coming through and doing really well too. So, look, there is just a lack of sense of organisation. There hasn't been this support coalescing behind anyone at the moment. And I still think that, you know, the Democratic Party as a source of opposition to Donald Trump right now, it is negligible. It is virtually non-existent.
We'll be back next week.
We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Newsagents USA.